Hello and welcome to Developing Roots in Community Real Estate, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of real estate development and its impact on communities we live in. I'm your host, Jessica Washington, and I am joined by my co-host, Ernest Williams. And in this next episode, we're going to embark on an exciting journey that explores the intersection of bricks and mortar and people and places.
Thank you, Jessica. As always, happy to be here on this journey with you. Real estate development isn't just about erecting buildings. It's about crafting communities. It's about designing spaces that breathe life into neighborhoods, fostering connection, and leaving a legacy for generations to come. In each episode, we'll bring you insightful interviews, expert insights, and inspiring stories from the front lines of real estate development in the DC area.
So whether you're a seasoned developer, an aspiring urban planner, or simply someone who cares about the places they call home, this podcast is your window into the dynamic world of community transformation. Together, we'll uncover the challenges, innovations, and triumphs that shape our cities and towns.
Before we bring on our first guest, we would like to give a big thanks to our sponsor, Capital Impact Partners, who are part of the Momentous Capital family. Capital Impact Partners is a community development financial institution, or CDFI, that engages in community development, real estate lending, and training and mentorship purposes. Now we will bring on our guest, John Stringfield, who is the Vice President of Business Development at Thompson Hospitality and formerly the President of DC Housing Enterprises, which is a subsidiary of the DC Housing Authority.
All right, John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So before we get into your illustrious career in real estate, just talk about what are some of the personal or some of the professional experience that you had before real estate that were really impactful and really shaped your perspective.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say growing up, my first mentor and teacher were my parents. My mom, she pushed me to read more, and my dad actually had a small business. And when I say a small business, he had a community store, and that's where I learned the first aspects of business, which are taking care of your customers. So that was my introduction to business at a very early age. And then from there, went to college. I was a college athlete at Norfolk State University. Was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army in a rapid deployment unit. And that means pretty much being anywhere in the world in 24 hours to accomplish a mission. And I will say being a military officer allowed me to develop a decision-making process, to be responsible for people, resources, and to understand that results matter. And from there, my next step in my professional career is where I entered business. I went to work for the Ryan family, Ryan Homes, Ryan Building Group, and I was in Chicago. And the man that hired me, his name was Jim Ryan. He was the founder of Ryan Homes and Ryland Homes, and he became a mentor to me then up until his passing about a year ago. But when he hired me, he said, "I'll teach you three things." He said, actually, he didn't say, "I'll teach you three things." He said, three things will happen with you joining my organization or join the organization. One, you'll be a division president within 24 months. You'll have the skills to be a division president within 24 months. We'll teach you that. Or one of my competitors will come and make you a division president, or you'll have the skills to go to a bank and get a loan on your own and understand how to build. And so all of those things, two of those things came true. I was on the path to become a division president within that time period, one, and then the skills that I learned from working with the Ryan organization allowed me to start my professional career in business.
Very good. So what influenced you? You talked about your path and how you got there, but what in particular influenced you to want to work in real estate?
Again, working in real estate as a junior military officer coming out of the military, a lot of Fortune 500 companies want you for your leadership abilities. And so, I was interviewing with Pepsi, GE, Bosch and Lombs. Those are some of the ones that I remember, Target, Walmart, to go be in some of their leadership development. programs. And actually, I was headed to GE, and I met Jim randomly at a hiring conference where you go as a junior military officer to have 10 to 15 interviews in a day with companies that actually want you to come be a manager in their organization. And I was on the elevator with Jim, and he said, "Who are you interviewing with?" I said, gave him a couple of companies. He said, "Well, you should come interview for me." I said, "You're not on my list." He said, and this guy, Jim, that was that was his style. So we went down, got put on his list, and met him, and that changed the trajectory of my life from going to work for GE to working for Jim Ryan, Ryan Building Group, his nephew, and his company. And that company was residential building, which is traditional production building stick built houses in a subdivision. Going to buy farmland, taking a look at what we can build, what product you want to build, and selling them to individual purchasers. So, and from there, I worked there for right at 3.5, maybe 4 years, and the market began to turn. This was early 2007, I believe, and I have to take a step back because during this time, like I said, I was reading, and I read a book called "Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun?" And that book, in conjunction with working with the Ryans, Reginald Lewis talked about going to law school and the trajectory of what being legally trained did for him in business. So that struck a note in my mind to go get a law degree. And so simultaneously as working for the Ryan Group and going out on my own, a few months later, I was in law school in New Orleans, and I never went to law school to be Perry Mason or actually practice law because, a lot of people think you have to practice law, but
just learn the law.
So it's I would say why I went to law school and became legally trained was it's one, a great credential. Two, it teaches you a lot about business, contracts, good and bad, and then the thought process or the process of how to attack and solve a problem. So those are the things that I got from going to law school and becoming an attorney. But with that, I always knew I wanted to get into business. Back to Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Reginald Lewis's book. He was the first Black billionaire, essentially, and he took his legal education to go into private equity and buy smaller companies, and eventually bought one of the largest companies at that time through a leveraged buyout. And I said, that's what I want to do.
Awesome. So you worked with Ryan Homes at first, then you eventually transitioned over to a governmental agency, DCHE, and now you're back with a private organization, Thompson Hospitality. What are some of the, I guess, similarities and differences you experience working for a private firm versus a public firm?
Well, I would say I left out a piece. Before I went to DCHE, there was probably a 12 to 13 year period where I was in business for myself. I started out renovating properties, buying houses down in New Orleans, buying lots in New Orleans, and that led me to be able to buy a few apartment buildings and partnering with people. They became mentors, business partners, and so I did that for about 12 to 13 years, which led me to buying small businesses on my own. So I've bought a few businesses and exited those businesses and returned capital from the investors that invested in me.
Right.
But that, how I arrived at DCHE, it was a time where, I had returned capital and I had some hiccups in business, to be completely transparent. I've had some successes and I've had some hiccups as well. And so it was at a point where I'd returned some capital to investors and I needed to reposition, and there was an opportunity for me to get back to the community. And that's how I arrived at DCHE. It was a transitional period for me to be able to give back as well as use my skills in real estate development and business to help grow that organization.
Okay. So yeah, we understand all the trials and tribulations, certainly, of running your own business. And like you said, having some successes, having some hiccups, but then it's a totally different experience when you're working for somebody else. And then totally different than that, working for a governmental agency, which has a lot of oversight. So just what are some of the similarities and differences in those experiences?
So I would say from a governmental standpoint, people are first. The people that you serve as a public servant are ultimately first, whether it's the community as a whole or individual residents that live within the community. So that was ultimately what was most important. From a private standpoint, we all know what that's about. The shareholders, the stakeholders, the CEOs, the bottom line. And but I would say similarity in both of those is understanding your objectives, mission first. So, public sector, the mission is to provide safe, decent, affordable housing. And that's the same holds true for the private sector. However, you're more focused on just as focused on the bottom line. I don't want to say you're not focused on the product that you deliver, but quality, service, and the time that you give it are all critical, where you don't have some of the luxuries you have in regards to time, you don't have in the private sector, because time is money and you have to be able to generate that return.
Very good. So one of your chief responsibilities at the DCHE was to oversee the allocation of new market tax credits. Provide us a brief explanation of what new market tax credits are and how they fuel community development.
Okay, new market tax credits are a tax credit program that is, you mentioned CDFI. CDFI is a community development financial institution. And so the CDFI fund is a division of the United States Treasury that actually issues new market tax credits. And new market tax credits are used to invest in underserved and in communities where investment would not happen but for these new market tax credits. So it's a dollar for dollar incentive for investors, businesses and private investors to invest. And what DCHE was a CDE, which is a community development entity, which is, we applied for new market tax credits from the CDFI fund. The CDI fund allocates about $1 billion a year, and DCHE received $55 million in the 2022 allocation. And of that $55 million from the allocation that I received, or my team received, we invested to date right at $24 million. And those two of those projects was the Whitman Walker Health Center in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., as well as D.C. Safe, which is the only 24-hour domestic abuse shelter in Washington, D.C.
All right. So you were starting to talk a little bit about some of the projects you worked on. Just tell us, give us a little bit more in depth about some other things you work with DCHE.
Okay. So three that are, I think, very impactful were the first phase of Berry Farm, the first phase of Park Morton, and the first phase of Kenilworth redevelopment. So all of those were housing authority projects where we use tax credits, low-income housing tax credits to finance those projects. And right now, all of those projects are in the final stages of their first phase. Berry Farm, the first phase, the Asbury, will be completed in the summer of 2024. Kenilworth actually should have residents moving in the next few months, early of 2024. And then Park Morton is expected to deliver the first phase in the fall of 2024 as well. So again, those are all in fact impactful projects that for one reason or another have somewhat been long stalled, but because of the work that my team and I did during that time, we got those off the ground, we got those to a financial close, and we got bricks in the ground, buildings in the ground, and soon we'll have residents and better housing.
Absolutely. Those are flagship projects for sure.
Yeah.
So why don't you share with us some initiatives you're currently working on in your role at Thompson Hospitality?
Okay, so to tell you a little bit about Thompson Hospitality. Thompson Hospitality is the largest minority food-owned food services company in the country. They provide food service as well as facilities maintenance to HBCUs, Fortune 500 companies throughout the country. And as a part of my role, I'll be responsible for growing revenue in the facilities maintenance as well as food service sectors of the business. So any way that we can grow revenue, I'll be taking a look at it, one, and then two, also to maintain the current relationships and contracts that we have that will fall under me as well, to ensure that one, bottom line is accounted for, but also to make sure that the service and quality that Thompson has a reputation for is maintained.
Is Thompson, I know it's the biggest, but is it mostly based on the East Coast, or is it a presence all over the country?
So the Thompson is, I believe, in 45 states, and they are the largest minority-owned food service company in the country.
All right. So outside of real estate, what are some of the causes that you're passionate about?
Some of the causes that I'm passionate about, as I mentioned, I'm a veteran. Helping veterans, talking to veterans as they transition. That's one. And then two would be just instilling some of my experiences, good and bad, with upcoming entrepreneurs in business, commercial real estate, and just letting them know that there is a path in commercial real estate, whether it's through finance, through having a construction background or a legal background, because I think commercial real estate is one of those areas where minorities don't necessarily know that it's available to them, one, and then two, if they do know it's available to them, how do they actually get into the business? So that's something that I'm passionate about, to make sure that there's an awareness of people of color in the commercial real estate and business space.
There certainly are multiple paths. And so, using what you just said, that you are passionate about sharing your experience, what are some words of wisdom for developers aspiring to work on public-private partnerships?
I would say not just public-private partnerships, and these are some of the words of wisdom that I give regardless, and they are: build relationships, make as many connections as you can, repeat connections, and then that way you will be able to create a professional network of people that know you, that will help you get to where you're going, because I think that's ultimately important, to have a network that can support you. And second part of that is to deliver results, because results matter, and that goes whether it's in business, whether it's in real estate, whether that's in life. People need a network, but you also need to be known for being able to deliver results. And I would say that's the words that I would leave with anyone. And I would say the last thing is keep the people that you are responsible for at the forefront of what you're doing. So focus on mission. And I'll say this is one of my professional leadership philosophies: mission first, people always. So just as important as keeping the mission, whether it's your profit, whether it's your organization, know what you're working for. And the second part is take care of your people.
All right. We appreciate it, John. Thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. How can people get in touch with you if they want to follow your journey, if they want to reach out just to find out more about what you're doing?
They can get in touch with me at jstringfield@thompsonhospitality.com.
Awesome.
Very good.
All right. Any last words, Ernest?
No, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a insightful conversation. There's not a lot of people talking about new market tax credits, so thank you for that, and we really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Well, we're signing off here. Again, I'm your host, Jessica Washington, your co-host, Ernest Williams, and this is the next episode of the Developing Roots in Community Real Estate podcast, brought to you by Capital Impact Partners, and we will catch you all in the next one.
See you soon.